This is the History of New Zealand podcast on the Eat to My Own Beat podcast network. This is episode 21 of the History of New Zealand podcast. Conflicts. The various conflicts of the New Zealand Wars span a considerable period, and the causes and outcomes differ wildly. The earliest conflicts in the 1840s happened at the time the Maori were still the predominant power. By the 1860s, settler numbers and resources were much greater. From about 1862, British troops began arriving in much greater number, summoned by Governor George Grey for his Waikato invasion. In March 1864, total troop numbers peaked at about 14,000. 9,000 imperial troops were more than the 4,000 colonial and a few hundred Quapaw. The Wairua Fray. The first armed conflict between Maori and European settlers took place on the 17th of June, 1843, the Wairua Valley in the north of the South Island. The clash was sparked when settlers led by a representative of the New Zealand Company, which held a false title deed to a block of land, attempted to clear Maori off the land ready for surveying. The party also attempted to arrest Ngati Toa chiefs Te Rapura and Te Rangahieta. Fighting broke out, and 22 Europeans were killed, as well as 4 to 6 Maori. 9 of the Europeans were slain after being captured. In early 1844, the new governor, Robert Fitzroy, investigated the incident and declared the new settlers were at fault. The Wairua Affray, described as Wairua Massacre in early text, was the only armed conflict of the New Zealand Wars to take place in the South Island. Northern War. The Flagstaff War took place in the far north of New Zealand, around the Bay of Islands, between March 1845 and January 1846, and was the first major conflict between the British and Maori people. In 1845, George Grey arrived in New Zealand to take up his appointment as governor. At this time, Hone Heke challenged the authority of the British, beginning by cutting down the flagstaff on Flagstaff Hill at Korokoreka. The flagstaff had previously flown the colors of the United Tribes of New Zealand, but now carried the Union Jack and therefore symbolized the grievances of the Heke and allied the Te Ruki Kawati as two changes that had followed the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. There were many causes of the Flagstaff War. The Heke had a number of grievances in the retaliation to the Treaty of Waitangi. While the land acquisition by the Church Missionary Society had been controversial, the rebellion led by Heke was directed against the colonial forces, with the CMS missionaries trying to persuade Heke to end the fighting. Despite the fact that Tamati Waka Nene and most of the Nakupi sided with the government, the small, ineptly led British force had been beaten at the Battle of Owenhawa. Grey, with the financial support and far more troops armed with the 32-pounder cannons that had been denied to Fitzroy, attacked and occupied Kawati's fortresses in Ruapakeka, forcing Kawati to retreat. Heke's confidence waned after he was wounded in battle with Tamati Wakai Nen and his warriors, and by realization that the British had far more resources than he could muster, including some Pakeha Maori who supported the colonial forces. After the Battle of Rakopeka, Heke and Kawati were ready for peace. They approached Tamati Waka Nene to act as an intermediary to negotiate with Governor Grey, who accepted the advice of Nene that Heke and Kawati should not be punished for the rebellion. Fighting of the north ended, and there was no punitive confiscation of Nakupi land. Hutt Valley and Wangui campaigns. The Hutt Valley campaign of 1846 came as a sequel to the Wairua Affair. The causes were similar: the dubious land purchases by the New Zealand Company and the desire of the settlers to move on to the land before the disputes over titles were resolved, and the conflicts shared many of the same protagonists. The campaign's most notable clashes were with the Maori Dawn Raid on the Imperial Stockade of Bullguts Farm on 16th of May, 1846, in which 8 British soldiers and an estimated 2 Maori died. Battle of Battle Hill from 6th of August to 13th of August, as British troops, local militia, and Quapaw pursued a Ngati Tau forest led by Te Rangaheta through steep and dense bushland. Ngati Tau chief Te Rapura was also taken into custody during the campaign. He was detained without charge in Auckland for 2 years. The bloodshed heightened settlers' fears in nearby Whanganui, which was given the strong military force to guard against the attack. In April 1847, an accidental shooting of minor Whanganui Maori chief led to the bloody revenge attack on a settler family when the perpetrators were captured and hanged. A major raid was launched at the town as a reprisal, with homes plundered and burned and livestock stolen. Maori besieged the town before mounting a frontal attack in July 1847. A peace settlement was reached in early 1848. Thank you for listening to the History of New Zealand podcast. We're found on YouTube and anywhere else you could find your normal podcasts. Please like, comment, and subscribe, or find us at www.eattomyownbeat.com.